Racist woman tore the dress thinking she was just a black waitress. Her millionaire husband saw. Before we start today's story, comment below where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you haven't already. You won't want to miss what's next. A mean woman named Vanessa Blackwood thought she was better than everyone else. She loved to show off and make people feel small. One night, she went to a very fancy party in Boston called the Boston Charity Gala. It was a special party where the richest people in the city came together to raise money for good causes. But some people at the party didn't really care about helping others. They just cared about looking important. Vanessa, who had been born rich and married a very rich man named Richard Blackwood, loved to be noticed. Her life was full of fancy things. Big houses, expensive clothes, jewelry, vacations, and fancy cars. She went to spa days and lunch with rich friends and rarely had to work for anything. But tonight, she wanted to show her power in a cruel way. She saw a young waitress named Aisha Bennett. Aisha was only 24 years old, and she was working very hard to finish her last year at Harvard University. She needed the money to pay for school and help her family, so she worked as a waitress at the gala. Aisha was very smart and kind. She had grown up in a tough neighborhood in Chicago, where her mother worked 3 jobs to take care of Aisha and her 2 younger brothers. Aisha's hair was tied neatly in a bun, and she carried trays of food and drinks carefully. She moved gracefully, like someone who had practiced balancing heavy responsibilities her whole life. But Vanessa didn't care about Aisha's hard work or education. All she saw was a young girl who she thought was just a waitress. Vanessa made a plan to humiliate Aisha. She spilled red wine all over Aisha's white dress on purpose. The wine spread like blood on fresh snow. Aisha froze for a moment, shocked. She had not expected this. But she quickly bent down to pick up the broken glass Vanessa had dropped. Vanessa smiled a mean, fake smile and said, "Oops. What a pity that people like you don't know how to move properly in civilized places." Her teeth were perfect, and her smile looked friendly, but her heart was full of cruelty. People at nearby tables stopped their conversations and stared. Some looked embarrassed, while others were secretly enjoying the drama. Aisha felt all the eyes on her, but she didn't cry. She had faced tough challenges before, and she had learned that true strength doesn't shout or cry, it waits and watches. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Aisha said quietly and politely. "I'll clean this right away." Vanessa laughed loudly, making sure everyone could hear her. "Oh, don't worry," she said. "Accidents happen when you hire people like this for important events." She looked around to make sure everyone saw her acting as if she were the boss. "Maybe next time, they should hire people who understand how to behave in refined society," she said, waving her hand dramatically. Aisha didn't argue or defend herself. She quietly took the broken glass and the spilled wine to the kitchen. She was strong because she had grown up watching her mother fight every day to take care of the family. By the age of 16, Aisha was already helping manage the family money, saving up for her brother's school, and translating legal documents for her mother. She had learned patience and how to deal with people who thought they were better than her. Vanessa continued to show off her cruelty. She gathered a group of rich women around her and told them loudly, "Did you see that? Some people just sneak into our events. The organizers didn't check properly. It's so daring of them." Her friend, Catherine Prescott, nodded and said, "Absolutely. These workers need to know their place. Some people just don't understand boundaries." Aisha quietly returned from the kitchen with clean towels and a fresh uniform. She continued her work, placing glasses on tables and arranging silverware, but she could hear Vanessa and Catherine whispering behind her back. "She probably needs this job badly," one woman said. "At least she didn't talk back. She knows her place." Vanessa noticed Aisha nearby and raised her voice even louder. "Anyway, girls, we shouldn't be too harsh. Not everyone is lucky enough to be born rich or go to proper schools," she said, pretending to be kind. What Vanessa didn't know was that Aisha had graduated top of her class in economics before coming to Harvard. She had worked for years to support her family and had earned scholarships to study abroad. She was smart, hardworking, and proud, even when rich people tried to make her feel small. Catherine decided to join the attack. She spoke directly to Aisha in a sweet but cruel voice. "Dear, You know workers should stay quiet and not draw attention, right? Yes, ma'am, Aisha said politely, looking straight at Catherine. Her calm confidence made Catherine frown. Aisha didn't act scared or shy. She looked like someone who had faced much worse and survived. Vanessa saw Catherine hesitate and decided to make Aisha feel even smaller. She stood up, walked over to Aisha, and asked loudly, "You can read, can't you?" Everyone stopped and stared. Aisha nodded calmly. "Yes, ma'am. I can read very well." Vanessa smiled, thinking she would make Aisha stumble. She handed Aisha the fancy dinner menu full of French words. "Then read this for us," she said, expecting Aisha to get embarrassed. But Aisha smiled slightly. "With pleasure, ma'am," she said. Then, something amazing happened. Aisha began to read the menu perfectly, in fluent French. She pronounced every word correctly, like someone who had studied in France. In fact, she had. Aisha had spent 2 years in Lyon, France, on a scholarship. She had learned French and even the details of French cooking. Her voice was calm, clear, and confident. Everyone in the room stopped talking and stared. The words flowed smoothly, like music, and even the rich people were impressed. Vanessa's smile faded. She realized that her plan to embarrass Aisha had completely failed. Richard Blackwood, Vanessa's husband, had been watching the whole scene. He saw how cruel his wife could be, but he also saw Aisha's strength and intelligence. He felt proud of Aisha and ashamed of Vanessa at the same time. Aisha finished reading the menu, set it down carefully, and returned to her work. She did not yell or boast. She just quietly did her job, showing calmness and confidence. Everyone could see who was really graceful and polite, and it wasn't Vanessa. Vanessa felt embarrassed in front of all the rich guests. Her plan to humiliate Aisha had backfired. She had tried to show that she was superior, but now everyone could see that Aisha was smart, brave, and composed. The party continued, but Aisha had changed something in the room. She has shown that being rich does not make someone better, and being kind, hardworking, and confident is more important than money or fancy clothes. As the night went on, more guests came to Aisha to talk. They were curious about the smart, brave young woman who had read French perfectly in front of the elite. Some even asked if she could help with charity planning, impressed by her intelligence and poise. Vanessa tried to ignore Aisha, but she couldn't hide her anger. Every time she saw Aisha, she felt smaller and weaker because Aisha had remained calm under pressure. Aisha had not let anyone's meanness affect her. Aisha's story was just beginning. She knew that this moment, though difficult, could lead to something big. She had worked hard all her life, and now people were starting to notice. She had turned what could have been humiliation into an opportunity to show her strength. Vanessa tried one last time to embarrass her. "Maybe you should stay in the kitchen," she said loudly. "This is no place for someone like you to shine." Aisha smiled softly and said, "I will do my best wherever I am, ma'am." That one simple answer made the room feel different. The rich guests, who had been judging Aisha, now began to see her in a new light. They saw intelligence, courage, and grace under pressure. Richard Blackwood leaned back in his chair and thought about his wife. He realized that Vanessa's cruelty had made her lose respect, while Aisha had earned it in just a few minutes. He started thinking that maybe the family needed a change. Maybe someone like Aisha could teach lessons in kindness and humility that Vanessa had never learned. Aisha finished her shift and left the main hall. She was tired, but her heart felt full. She had faced cruelty and come out stronger. She had shown that hard work, education, and dignity are more important than wealth or status. Vanessa Blackwood left the party feeling bitter. She had tried to show power, but she had failed. Meanwhile, Aisha had gained respect from the richest people in the room. The story of that night would not be forgotten. Aisha went home that night and thought about her family. She smiled, knowing that her mother and brothers would be proud. She realized that even in moments of unfairness, she could shine and make a difference. From that night on, Aisha felt more confident. She knew she could face any challenge, whether mean people like Vanessa or hard situations in life. And the Boston Charity Gala became a story of justice, courage, and dignity, showing everyone that being rich does not make you better, and being kind, brave, and smart is far more powerful. People who were at the party would remember Aisha for a long time. Not because she was serving wine and food, but because she stayed calm, clever, and brave under pressure. Vanessa's cruelty had failed, and Aisha had won, not with anger, but with strength and patience. And that is why Aisha Bennett became an example for others. Even when people try to hurt you or make you feel small, you can stay strong, show your skills, and earn respect. No one expected a young waitress to teach such a big lesson, but Aisha did. And from that night on, people knew that never underestimate someone just because they seem small or unimportant. Catherine stared with her mouth wide open, and the other women in the group looked at each other, unsure what to do. Alastair Montague walked past, carrying a small dish of vanilla from Madagascar. Aisha finished serving it, gave the menu back to Vanessa, and smiled quietly. "I hope that helped, ma'am," she said politely. The room became very quiet. It was the kind of silence that felt almost too loud. Vanessa stood there, holding the menu, and for the first time that evening, she had no words. She could not deny it. This simple waitress, the young woman in front of her, was smart, polite, and calm. Maybe even smarter than anyone else in that fancy room. Richard got up from the main table and walked slowly toward the group. His eyes met Aisha's for a brief moment, and she noticed something in his gaze. It wasn't a pity. It wasn't sympathy. It was respect. And maybe a little bit of admiration. "Vanessa," he said softly, his voice serious, "perhaps it's time we focus on the real reason we are here tonight, charity." Vanessa quickly acted normal again. She straightened up and smiled as if nothing had happened. "Of course, dear. I was just making sure everyone understood the proper way to behave," she said. Aisha nodded politely and stepped away to continue her work. But before she left, Catherine whispered nervously to Vanessa, "Darling, maybe we misjudged her." Vanessa grabbed Catherine's arm tightly, whispering sharply, "We didn't misjudge anything. No tricks can hide who she really is. And before tonight is over, I'll make sure everyone here understands that perfectly well." What Vanessa didn't know was that Aisha had spent the last 4 years carefully studying how people treat others unfairly because of race. For her Harvard MBA project, she had learned all the new civil rights laws. She had small recording devices hidden in her uniform, and every mean word spoken that night was being recorded perfectly. While Vanessa was planning how to embarrass Aisha in front of everyone, Aisha walked calmly through the room. She carried a secret so powerful that no one could see it yet. Aisha had learned from her life in Chicago that real strength doesn't scream. It doesn't yell. Real strength watches quietly, takes notes, and acts at exactly the right moment. Richard returned to the main table but could not stop thinking about the young woman he had just seen. She had been treated very badly by his own wife, yet she stood there with calmness and dignity. There was something about Aisha that made him curious. She had a quiet confidence, intelligence, and poise that could not be hidden no matter what uniform she wore. What nobody in the room could have guessed was that the young woman Vanessa was trying to humiliate would soon become the youngest senior analyst at one of the country's most important consulting firms. Every unkind word and every act of discrimination that night was being documented. Those acts were going to turn into a case that would help Aisha achieve justice. Aisha finally went to the hotel's elegant bathroom to take a brief moment for herself. She let her hands shake just slightly. Not from fear, but from a rush of excitement she knew well from her past, defending herself on the streets of Chicago. She took out her small digital recorder and checked that it was working. The recording was perfect. 23 minutes of racial insults, unfair treatment, and mean words, every single one documented carefully. For her MBA project about racial microaggressions in big companies, tonight was like discovering gold. But when she looked at herself in the large gilded mirror, Aisha realized that what was happening was bigger than just a school project. This was real life, and tonight could change everything. There was a soft knock on the door. "Are you okay?" asked a familiar voice. It was Richard Blackwood. Aisha hesitated for a moment. She considered ignoring him, but his voice sounded genuinely concerned, so she opened the door. Richard stood there, alone in the hallway. His hands were clasped together, and his posture showed he was nervous. "I want to apologize for my wife's behavior," he said. "There is no excuse for what I just witnessed." Aisha studied him carefully. Her life had taught her to recognize when someone truly respected her and when someone was just pretending. In Richard's eyes, she saw real shame and real anger at his own family. "Mr. Blackwood," Aisha said, "thank you for your concern, but you don't need to feel responsible for your wife's actions." "Of course I do," Richard replied firmly. "After 23 years of marriage, I've had many chances to stop behavior like this, and I failed." "Aisha, may I ask you a direct question?" She nodded, curious. "You're not really a waitress, are you?" Aisha smiled for the first time that night. "Why do you think that? Your French is better than anyone else's in that room, even better than some professors from very famous universities. The way you stand, the way you speak, the way you keep your dignity even when attacked." "I'm an MBA student at Harvard," Aisha said. "I work as a waitress to help my family and to finish my studies." Richard closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "Harvard. My God, Aisha. Vanessa attacked a Harvard student just because of her race." "Mr. Blackwood," Aisha said calmly, "this happens more often than you realize. Your wife just said out loud what many people think quietly. But that doesn't make it right." "That makes it even worse," Richard said, his voice full of strong emotion. "May I ask what your area of expertise is at Harvard?" he continued. "Analysis of systemic discrimination in corporate environments," Aisha said. "I'm finishing a thesis on how prejudice affects career opportunities for minorities." Richard stayed silent for a long time, clearly thinking. Then he leaned in and said, "Aisha, may I make a proposal to you?" 15 minutes later, they were sitting together in a quiet corner of the hotel lobby, far from prying eyes. Richard had ordered 2 coffees, and he spoke quietly, like he was sharing an important secret. "My company, Blackwood Development, has been struggling with diversity issues," Richard said. "The board is asking for real change, not just fake improvements. I need someone with your knowledge to examine our hiring practices, promotions, and company culture. I need someone who understands both the theory and reality of discrimination in the workplace." "Mr. Blackwood, that is very generous," Aisha said. "But it seems more like urgency than generosity." "No, it's urgent," Richard said firmly. "My company really needs change, and you are the best person to help. Here's my card. You will be paid like a professional consultant and have complete independence over your work." Aisha took the card, amazed by the possibilities. "Why are you doing this?" If you're enjoying this story, make sure to subscribe and share your favorite part in the comments below. And don't forget to drop a heart to show your support. She asked, "Because I spent 23 years living with a woman whose prejudices I silently tolerated. Because I built a company that probably has the same problems you study. And frankly, after what I witnessed tonight, I need to do something meaningful to repair the damage my family may have caused in the world," Richard said. At that moment, Vanessa appeared in the lobby, looking for her husband. When she saw him talking to Aisha, her face showed barely hidden anger. "Richard, dear," she said, approaching the table with a forced smile, "what are you doing here with her?" "Vanessa," Richard said calmly, "I'm offering Aisha a position as a consultant in the company." The silence that followed was heavy. Vanessa looked between her husband and Aisha as if she had just seen a huge betrayal. "You're joking, right?" she said nervously, her voice higher than usual. "Richard," she added, trying again, "she's just a waitress. Are you serious?" "Yes, Vanessa," Richard replied firmly. "She's an MBA student at Harvard specializing in exactly the area where our company needs help. The woman you humiliated tonight is highly qualified and will help the company." Vanessa visibly paled. "Harvard?" she whispered. "Yes, Vanessa," Richard said calmly. "Harvard. The woman you tried to embarrass tonight is intelligent, educated, and working here to support her family." Aisha observed Vanessa carefully. She studied how people behave in moments of shock. Vanessa was clearly stunned, but she was already trying to figure out how to protect her own image and reputation. "Well, Richard," Vanessa said slowly, "even if what you say is true, it doesn't mean we should make sudden decisions based on feelings of guilt." "It's not guilt, Vanessa," Richard said, his voice steady. It's recognizing competence and the real needs of the company. Vanessa looked at Aisha directly for the first time since the initial embarrassment. "Darling," she said, her voice forced into politeness. "Sometimes people misunderstand each other at social events. Perhaps we should all just forget tonight's minor disagreements." Aisha stayed calm and polite, but her words were precise. "Ms. Blackwood, there was no misunderstanding. Your comments were very clear and direct." Vanessa forced another smile. "Of course, dear. But intelligent people like you surely understand that social situations can be complicated." Aisha replied calmly, without raising her voice. "Actually, people with my academic background tend to be very careful about context and meaning, especially when it comes to documented racial discrimination." The word documented made Vanessa flinch slightly. Documented. She didn't like it at all. It was like a tiny alarm bell ringing in her mind. Richard noticed the look on his wife's face immediately. He could tell something was wrong. "Vanessa," he asked carefully, "were you recorded?" Aisha didn't answer with words. Instead, she stayed silent and calm. But that silence spoke louder than any words. Vanessa began to realize slowly that this evening was not just about embarrassing an employee. This night had become something much bigger. It was about her own mistakes being seen by the world. Aisha Richards rose from her chair at the table. She looked confident and collected. "I await your response to the consulting proposal," she said. "My assistant will contact you tomorrow with the contract details." As Aisha walked away, she could hear the beginning of a loud discussion between Vanessa and Richard. Vanessa was panicking because she had attacked the wrong person in the wrong way at the wrong time. She had humiliated someone who did not deserve it, and now the consequences were becoming clear. Back in the bathroom, Aisha carefully checked her recorder again. She smiled as she saw the evidence she had captured. There were 23 minutes of Vanessa speaking with hurtful, unfair, and racist words, followed by 15 minutes of Vanessa trying desperately to fix the damage she had caused. For Aisha's school thesis, this recording was like finding treasure. But more than that, it was a chance to make real change in a big company. Aisha realized that this night had changed everything. The cruel act Vanessa had tried to use against her was actually helping Aisha move into a position of power and influence. Vanessa didn't know that she had attacked not just a waitress, but someone who would soon be an expert on fairness in the workplace. Someone who would now have access to the company's systems. The situation felt ironic to Aisha, but she knew that true justice wouldn't come from revenge. It would come from careful planning, hard work, and creating real change. Aisha checked herself in the mirror one last time. Tonight marked the end of one part of her life and the beginning of something completely new. Vanessa thought she was putting Aisha in her place, but in reality, she was helping her rise into a position of power. Aisha would make sure that nobody else would have to endure the same humiliation she had faced. The waitress Vanessa had tried to humiliate was now about to become a consultant. And when that happened, Vanessa would discover exactly where she belonged in a world where talent and character mattered more than money or social status. 3 weeks later, Vanessa Blackwood woke up with a strange feeling in her stomach. Her phone was full of notifications. She had 47 missed calls and hundreds of unread messages. She felt a pit in her stomach and slowly opened the first message. It was a link sent by Catherine, her friend. Vanessa's heart sank as she saw the headline. Business executives attacked for racial discrimination. Viral audio exposes the Boston elite. Below the headline was a photo of her at the gala, her face frozen with a look of disdain for everyone to see. The 23-minute audio recording of her speaking hurtful, racist words was being played on every major radio station in the city. Every word she had said against Aisha was crystal clear, followed by people's shocked and angry reactions. Vanessa ran down the stairs to the kitchen, where Richard was quietly drinking coffee. He looked calm but cold, and Vanessa had never seen him like this before. His face was serious and distant. "Richard, you have to do something. This is a coordinated attack. That waitress is trying to destroy us," Vanessa cried, waving her phone in the air. Richard didn't look shocked or scared. He said quietly, "That waitress is now our new corporate diversity consultant. After listening to this audio, I fully understand why our company needs her." Vanessa froze. What did you just say? Aisha started yesterday, Richard continued. Her first project will be a complete check of our company, including analyzing all employees in leadership positions. I imagine you understand what this means. Vanessa's hands shook as her phone rang. It was Eleanor Whitaker, the chair of the tennis club Vanessa had been part of for 15 years. Vanessa, the board met in an emergency session this morning, Eleanor said sharply. Your membership has been revoked effective immediately. Your behavior in the audio recording is completely incompatible with our values. Before Vanessa could even respond, the call ended. Then her phone exploded with messages. The WhatsApp group Ladies Who Lunch, which had been her social circle for years, was buzzing with people talking about her. I can't believe I've known her for years, one message read. How many Aishas has she humiliated without us even knowing? Business contacts started canceling deals. Her Instagram followers dropped by 3,000 overnight, with comments like, "What a disgusting person. Rich racist exposed. I hope she learned something from this." Catherine called crying. Vanessa Charles canceled a contract for an office renovation. I don't want to be associated with toxic people anymore, he said. Vanessa felt completely helpless. I'm socially ruined, she whispered to herself. She was hyperventilating, struggling to breathe. Richard, you have to make that audio disappear. Sue her. Do something. Vanessa begged, her voice shaking. Richard stood up slowly and calmly. Vanessa, you recorded this yourself. Every word came out of your mouth. There's nothing to sue except your own cruelty. Then her phone rang again. This time it was Dr. Malcolm, the director of the charitable foundation where Vanessa had been a volunteer vice president for 8 years. Vanessa, he said coldly, the board has voted unanimously to remove you from all positions. Effective immediately. Frankly, discovering that one of our leaders expressed such discrimination was shocking to all of us. Vanessa collapsed into a chair. In less than 24 hours, she had lost her social standing, her friendships, her charity commitments, and the trust of her own community. You know what the most ironic part is? Richard said, folding his newspaper. Aisha didn't even have to do anything. She just documented your true nature and let your own words speak for themselves. At that very moment, Aisha was at the Blackwood Development Office, being introduced to the Human Resources team. She looked professional and confident in an elegant suit, carrying a briefcase full of proposals for structural changes. She had gone from a humiliated waitress to a respected consultant in less than a month. Starting today, Richard announced during the department meeting, Aisha Bennett will lead our diversity and inclusion initiative. She has full authority to implement necessary changes in our corporate culture. The employees greeted her with respectful curiosity. Many had heard the viral audio and understood the significance of her hiring. Aisha addressed the team with calm confidence. My goal is not to punish anyone, but to create an environment where everyone feels valued and respected, regardless of their background or appearance. Meanwhile, Vanessa remained locked in her home, watching her social life crumble through social media. Each notification brought a new humiliation, canceled invitations, and lost friendships. Catherine had stopped answering her calls. Eleanor Whitaker posted a photo from the tennis club, celebrating values of inclusion and respect. Even her hairdresser canceled her appointments, saying she was fully booked. Richard went up to the bedroom that night and found Vanessa crying in front of the mirror. 23 years, he said simply. 23 years I lived with this person and pretended not to see. Richard, please, can we talk about this? It was a terrible misunderstanding, Vanessa begged. It's not a misunderstanding, Richard said firmly. It was you being exactly who you always were. But this time, someone recorded it. He walked over to the closet and began removing his clothes. My lawyers will deliver the divorce papers tomorrow. The house is yours, but our shared assets will be divided according to the court's ruling. Vanessa stood up desperately. You can't be serious because of a waitress. Richard corrected her calmly. Because of a Harvard student you attacked out of racial prejudice. Because of 23 years of tolerating your cruelty. Because I discovered that my wife is exactly the kind of person I've always admired. As I pack my bags, you finally understand what you have lost. Not just a marriage, but your entire social identity built on foundations that were as fragile as glass. The next morning, Aisha woke up in her apartment near Harvard. She prepared for another day of work that would change not only her life, but also the culture of an entire company. Her phone was filled with messages of support from colleagues, professors, and even strangers who had heard her story. What had started as a night of extra work to pay the bills had turned into a life-changing opportunity. And it all happened because a privileged woman had completely underestimated who she was attacking. While Vanessa's life fell apart, Aisha walked confidently toward a future she would build with competence, dignity, and strength. The waitress Vanessa had tried to put in her place was now about to redefine what it really meant to occupy a position of power and use it for good. 6 months later, Aisha was promoted to Director of Diversity at Blackwood Development. She implemented policies that became a model for companies across the country. Her private consulting business grew quickly, helping large companies make real change. Vanessa lived alone in her empty mansion. Divorced, friendless, and banished from the social circle she once dominated, she tried desperately to rebuild her image. Her attempts failed, one after another. Richard married a civil rights lawyer and donated half his fortune to scholarships for students like Aisha. At the Harvard graduation ceremony, Aisha spoke to hundreds of students. Never let anyone define your worth based on prejudice. The best revenge is success they never imagined possible. Vanessa's audio was still being used in schools as an example of the consequences of prejudice and cruelty. Her mistakes had become a lesson for generations. Aisha had turned humiliation into purpose. She built a legacy that would change lives for years to come. The waitress who had been underestimated by Vanessa was now a symbol of strength, intelligence, and fairness. She had shown that kindness, competence, and hard work are far stronger than wealth or privilege. Her journey had begun with a single night of courage and patience, and it had grown into a future filled with opportunity, justice, and respect. And Vanessa, once so powerful in her social world, now had nothing but regret. Every time she saw her old friends, they had moved on. Every social event reminded her of what she had lost. Her world had collapsed because she underestimated someone she thought was below her. Aisha's story became a reminder to everyone. True power comes not from wealth, status, or cruelty, but from intelligence, courage, and doing what is right. If this story moved you, please subscribe for more kind and powerful stories. Watch our next video for another unforgettable journey. And share this story with someone who needs it today.